Good evening. My name is Chris Lynch. Tonight we're starting with 4 public hearings, and I declare these public hearings open.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications of the 2017 North Central Junior High Storage Building Project. The Board of Directors set the time for this public hearing on January 10th, 2017. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on January 11th, 2017. The district will receive bids on this project at 2:30 p.m. February 2nd, 2017 at the physical plant located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on January 11, 2017. Are there any questions from the board?
These are going to be just 3 identical sheds. Is that correct, Dwayne?
That is correct.
Others? Any questions from the public? Okay. Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications of the 2017 Hills Elementary School Storage Building Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on January 10th, 2017. Notice of public hearing was published in Iowa City Press Citizen on January 11th, 2017. The district will receive bids on this project at 2 p.m. February 2nd, 2017 at the physical plant located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on January 11th of 2017. Are there any questions from the board? Any from the public? All right. All right. Thank you all for doing these compounded for me. Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications of the 2017 Corval Central Elementary School Storage Building Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on January 10th, 2017. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on January 11th of 2017. The district will receive bids on this project at 2:15 February 2nd, 2017 at the physical plant located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to the contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on January 11th, 2017. Are there any questions from the board? Any from the public? All right. One more. Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications of the 2017 Roof Improvement Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on January 10th, 2017. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on January 11th, 2017. The district will receive bids on this project at 2:30 p.m. February 15th, 2017 at the Educational Services Center located at 1725 North Dodge Street, Iowa City, Iowa 52245. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on January 11th of 2017. Are there any questions from the board? Any from our public?
Thank you, Latasha. I declare these public hearings closed. Welcome to the Iowa City Community School Board meeting on Tuesday, January 24th. My name is Chris Lynch. I call this meeting to order. I'd like to thank those in the audience for taking an interest in our district business, and for those on TV. I'd like to start tonight by introducing those at the table with me tonight. To my right is Superintendent Steve Murley and Directors Lori Rowland, Phil Hemingway, Brian Kersling, Latasha Deloche, Paul Rosler, Chris Liebig, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. The public is reminded if they wish to speak, they need to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during the community comment section of the agenda. And the first item on the agenda is the community comment section. Thank you for your interest in the Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You're reminded to give your name, address, and the topic you wish to speak. All community comment directed at non-agenda and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker. Initial community comment shall be limited to 1 hour. Remaining comment, to the extent necessary, shall take place at the end of the meeting. To the extent you are commenting on items not on our posted agenda, the board may ask follow-up questions of speakers, but is prohibited by Iowa open meetings laws from responding to questions from speakers or engaging in substantial discussion regarding non-agenda items. With that, first up tonight is Julie Van Dyke, and on deck will be Bridget Ingersoll.
Am I to understand from the city of Iowa City that an autistic child or a child potentially on the spectrum disappeared from West High on Wednesday, on Monday, and hasn't been found yet? It was reposted today on Facebook, I believe, by the city of Iowa City. Can you possibly tell me why a district-wide notice of some kind hasn't gone out about this child? This is the second child I remember running off from West High now, under 2 different principals. If this kid dies and you haven't done everything you possibly can to help locate him, it's on you. And you and everyone here that knows better than to let this happen again. I am just speechless. What is wrong with you people? What is wrong with this district? And today we do the Student Climate Survey Task Force report and the Special Education Staff Culture and Climate Survey. More lip service. None of the parents that I know were contacted about this. You know my kid has an IEP. For 6 years, I don't know anything about this. Have you constituted the group looking into the seclusion rooms, the holes yet? Have they done that yet, Phil? Asked to be on that group.
We're prohibited by open meetings laws from responding to
I've
questions.
asked to be on that group. I continue to ask to be on that group. And it would be really neat if instead of trying to shuffle it off into committee where it can kind of bounce around for a while, geez, what do we bring this up back like October? We still haven't even constituted a committee and had the first meeting. Why don't you do it in public? Why don't you stop trying to shove everything under the rug and cover your own butts and cover his butt and cover the district's butt and stop worrying about liability and worry a little bit more about what you can do to help people feel better, learn better, care for each other, care about each other, and look out for each other better instead of looking out for yourselves. I mean, my God. Can we also hire a few more top-level administrators or reposition a few more and cut some more special ed teachers and paras while we're at it, too? What are you thinking?
Thanks, Julie.
Is it possible to ask a question that's been raised by the community concerning a student that is missing? Could we just get a comment on that, because it is pertinent?
To the extent I can comment, I know that the West High School is working closely with the Iowa City Police Department and the parent to locate the student.
Thanks, Steve. Bridget, Kate Moreland, be next.
Good evening. I'm Bridget Ingersoll, and I have 1 child at Northwest Junior High and 3 at Borlaug, where I've been on the PTO board since we opened. I'm a member of the group that sent the board a letter in support of moving forward with the full GO bond. The letter is dated January 19th, 2017, and it reads, Dear ICCSD Board of Directors, the undersigned write to urge the board to follow through with the district's promise to fund a full comprehensive facilities master plan, FMP. The recently discussed idea to reduce the bond request would require the board to cut the FMP into sections. We believe reducing the bond and dissecting the FMP is a mistake that would fracture the district and risk bond failure. The district website provides the following description of the FMP. The plan, as originally proposed and then modified over time, was set up to balance the needs of the existing and new facilities, the needs of elementary and junior high school and high school facilities, the needs of the city of Coralville, Hills, Iowa City, North Liberty, and University Heights, and rural Johnson County. The selection of the timeline for projects was designed to balance these needs, and the changes in scope and timeline proposed by the administrative team are a reflection of our understanding of the need to continue to have this balance in the plan. The amount of resources, time, and thought that went into the FMP's creation is well documented and well known to the community. Over the course of 4 years, we have worked together to create a comprehensive, balanced plan. The board faces a late January deadline to submit a bond request to the state. A partial bond request, by definition, dissects the FMP. We are concerned that the community will lack confidence in an FMP that is modified over the course of only 2 weeks and 3 listening posts. The community came together to create the FMP. Once the FMP is attached to a bond, it becomes a promise that the district will keep. We stand ready to advocate for a full bond because we are committed to providing the children in our community a quality public education. This letter was signed by the community leaders who believe in the promise to move forward, to make our schools competitive with other schools in Iowa, and better yet, to make the ICCSD a leader in public education. The signers include Iowa City Area Chamber of Commerce, Iowa City Area Development Group, Iowa City Downtown District, Greater Iowa City Area Home Builders Association, Every Student, Any School, all of the Johnson County legislators, area elected officials in their individual capacities, including Rockne Cole, Terry Dickens, Mitch Gross, Mike Haverkamp, Chris Hoffman, Jim Lane, John Lendell, Susan Mims, Rod Sullivan, Pauline Taylor, and John Thomas. All 3 high school principals, numerous local business leaders, and parents from across the district. The community is ready to support the FMP and the bond. We ask the board to come together to lead us in the direction of progress. Thank you for your service.
Thanks, Bridget. Kate? Shauna Easton will be next.
Good evening. I'm Kate Moreland, and I live here in Iowa City. I'm also one of the signers in support of moving forward with the full GO bond. I have a junior and a freshman at West High and a 5th grader at Weber. I'm here tonight to ask the board to approve the language for a full amount of the bond. The facility master planning process began in 2012, and as the community relations director for the school district at that time, I was very involved with that process. To date, the process involved thousands of hours of work with staff, students, parents, and community members. Our oldest child was in 6th grade when planning began. I was part of the numerous community engagement sessions where we discussed the needs for equitable and flexible environments for all of our students. The facility master planning process we have endured has been comprehensive and exhaustive. The 2017 bond was always part of the plan, and without it, the very goal of a unifying facility master plan will be in jeopardy. Our school facilities are inadequate. While we continue to focus on busing, buildings, and boundaries, other schools in the area are building STEM centers and implementing innovative 21st century learning environments. In my current role as the Community Relations Director for ICAD, I work with my team to attract business and people to the area. Quality schools are the #1 priority when people decide whether or not to relocate. While we have the most qualified teaching staff in the state, our facilities have fallen behind. Passing the full bond is a critical next step if we want our district to compete with other public schools in the state and in the country. And I mention country because we aren't just competing with Iowa. We're competing with Charlotte, Minneapolis, and Portland, among many others. We have trouble recruiting people because public schools in our state and our district are underfunded. By passing the full bond, we make it clear that this school district prioritizes public school excellence, even if our legislature does not. It's been nearly 5 or 6 years since the FMP process began, and our 5th grader is now a junior and will graduate with ever having full air conditioning in her high school and having any changes at all to her learning environment. By prolonging the facilities debate, we've delayed essential discussion about the actual education of our students. Get the full bond passed so we can start focusing on making sure our kids are receiving the 21st century education they deserve in environments they can be proud of. If you don't openly support the bond here tonight or in the weeks to come, you are standing in the way of progress. You are elected to represent all students of the district. You have strong community support. As a board, you need to come together now on this issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Sean? Kelly Terrell will be next.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sean Eystone, 640 Broadmoor Drive, North Liberty, as they say on the radio, first time, long time. I'm here tonight to add my voice to the concerns with the proposal to break up the general obligation bond into smaller pieces. I understand the uncertainty of asking this community to pass a bond issue with such a large number attached to it, but I think the alternative of asking them to pass multiple bonds over multiple years carries a bigger risk with a greater uncertainty. I also understand one of the rationales behind this approach is to give the legislature more time to approve an extension to save in order to then not require a second or third bond vote. However, unfortunately, I believe there's even more uncertainty with that prospect than there is with passing multiple bond votes. Having a plan that serves the entire community is paramount to receiving support needed to pass this bond. I've had the wonderful opportunity to visit schools all across this district, and every time I do, I'm reminded of how there are physical limitations that we need to address everywhere. When I was on the campaign trail with several of you guys, we had one of the most enjoyable opportunities I had was when we got to visit government classes at City High. When it came time for our group, with Director Deloach was in my group, we headed out to Carrie Watton's classroom. We left the relative nice comfort air-conditioned office and were met with a wall of hot, humid air and hallways packed with students. It was painfully clear even then that City High needed some attention. And every time now when I go to my church, I see Horace Mann just a couple blocks down the street, and I think about how hot it gets on that third floor. You know, when there's an early dismissal of an hour or two for heat, you know, it's a minor inconvenience to my family, because my kids think it's a little vacation. But those kids in the schools without the air, they're dealing with some very uncomfortable conditions long before that early dismissal time arises. This is not an equitable learning environment. As you're well aware, we also have an issue with overcrowding in this district. We have portable classrooms all across from Garner all the way down to Alexander. And as a North Liberty parent, I recognize and appreciate the district-wide needs that we have to be addressed. It isn't all doom and gloom. I've seen the beauty of what a comprehensive plan can offer. The additions and remodels at Twain, Coralville Central, and Penn are great examples of these successes. And despite the portables being there, I've heard wonderful stories from the teachers and students of Alexander of how they love their new building. And just last night, I attended a parents' meeting to get instructions on how to register my soon-to-be freshman son at Liberty High School. While it makes me feel really old, I'm very grateful for that opportunity. Again, wonderful successes across our district. If the bond is split up, that will necessitate splitting up the facilities master plan in multiple pieces, and I think this would unnecessarily pit an already at times fractured community against itself. The reason for a comprehensive plan isn't simply to get people across the district on board with voting together. It's to ensure that we are providing all the students of the district an equitable learning environment. All of you as directors of the ICCSD Board of Education have voiced your commitment to all of the students and families of this district. I would ask that you honor that commitment by showing continued support of a comprehensive facilities master plan and the intact general obligation bond necessary to fund it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Kelly? On deck will be Mark Nolte.
My name is Kelly Gallagher Terrell. I live at 816 Evergreen Court in Iowa City. I have one child at Hoover Elementary and another child who will enter Hoover next year. I am also one of the signers in the letter in support of moving forward with the full GO bond. The stated purpose of having a facilities master plan is to make sure that students from every corner of the district benefit from it. For my children, that means Lemmy Elementary, where they will go after Hoover closes, will receive a gymnasium addition. Then, the building will have 2 common spaces, and the need to schedule specials in the gym will no longer dictate when other subjects are taught. Southeast Junior High will have additional classrooms and air conditioning, and City High will have a cafeteria and library improvements that actually accommodate the number of students enrolled at those schools. These are the improvements that will benefit my children, But I also support the full GO bond and the full FMP because West High needs air conditioning. And that's not all it needs. With the full bond, West High will get interior and exterior renovations, new windows, and plumbing upgrades. North Central Junior High will get desperately needed classroom additions and, again, adequate library and cafeteria space. Shimmick and Northwest Junior High will get air conditioning and a new roof. The improvements on the FMP are not cosmetic, they are essential. Whether because of inadequate funding, complacency, or a lengthy vetting process, we have delayed facilities improvements throughout the district. Without the bond, we cannot pay for any of the improvements I just mentioned. We simply cannot afford further delay. So how do we pass the bond in September? We keep it in one piece so the board can guarantee the balance that the comprehensive FMP provides. We keep it in one piece because for the past 4 years, that was the community's intent. We keep it in one piece because our community believes in supporting public schools. We keep it in one piece because this is our chance to move forward now. We cannot afford to rely on future tenuous funding when the full bond is within our reach. Finally, I urge the full board to lead the community with the full bond request. We do not have time for more analysis and debate or more iterations of the FMP and the bond. We need facility improvements, and we need them yesterday. Thank you very much for your service.
Thanks, Kelly. Mark? Karen Wootman will be on deck.
Good evening. I'm Mark Nolte, 1049 Pheasant Valley. I'm with the Iowa City Area Development Group, and our family currently has 4 students in the district. And I would just like to echo the comments of my more well-prepared and eloquent supporters. Our name was on that letter. The hallmark of this community has always been its support for public education, and that's why we're growing so quickly. And I think we've outgrown our district's ability to support these students in a meaningful way. And if we want to be competitive and have a strong economy in the future, we need 21st century learning environments. And so breaking the bond up and trying to do it piecemeal is not the best way forward, in my opinion. So I know it's a big bond, I know it's bold, but that's what leaders do. And I think you'll find you'll have a lot more support in the community than you might realize. This community has always supported education, and I think with the state, some of the changes at the state and how they're going to fund public education, I think it's a rally cry for this community to pull together and do it as a full district. And some of those old divides between east and west and north will disappear as everyone sees that there's a benefit in every building for their children and the children generations to come. So I'd urge your support on the full GO bond. I hope you can pull forward and just know that there'll be a lot of support in the community for this as we go. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Karen? On deck will be Dina Barusha.
Good evening. Karen Woltman, 880 Grouse Lane, North Liberty. I'm here to speak about the Homeschool Assistance Program and the recommendation to change the FMP with regard to TREC that is on your work session agenda for tonight. When my family first enrolled in the district HSAP program 7 years ago, the program was housed in one room of a modular building in the Northwest Junior High parking lot. The move to TREC has been tremendously positive for the HSAP program. Our children now have access to an art room, a gymnasium, classroom space, outdoor space, and indoor plumbing. HSAP serves K-12 students from all over the district, so TREC's central location and adequate parking lot for parents are also important. In short, the space at TREC is serving the HSAP program and our children well. So I can't begin to tell you how disheartening it is to suddenly find our space on the chopping block without an adequate alternative plan in place for our children. I've heard that TREC programs will likely be moved to West High School. It's hard to see this as a good option for the HSAP program. As you discuss this issue, please keep in mind that many HSAP students are in grades K through 6, with the youngest grade levels typically heavily represented, and that parents need to have access to parking throughout the school day to get our children to activities at the HSAP program. HSAP students are district students, and they need to continue to have appropriate space included for them in the facilities master plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Dina? Charlie Eastman will be on deck.
Good evening. I'm Dina Bishara, and I'm a I'm 15 Fairchild. I have a kindergartner and a third grader who attend Shimmick Elementary, and I'm here to speak about special education. First, I just want to thank the board for continuing to address and have dialogue on these issues, and I especially want to thank Interim Director of Special Education, Jane Fry, for opening a dialogue with some parents. So I've had a chance to read the summary of Special Education Climate and Culture Survey and just wanted to share a few thoughts. The first is that it goes without saying, and I'm sure you all agree, that the data collected on retaliatory acts that are reported to have been perpetuated on staff and parents are very alarming. This is a dark star among a constellation of other issues, including the previously reported IEP violations and the widespread and heretofore publicly unexamined use of isolation rooms and boxes, which taken together work to erode the confidence of some parents like me in the district. While I'm glad to see that a representative from the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service will be meeting with special education staff in person this week to further explore issues exposed in the special education survey, I have to ask what assurances have been given to staff to convince them that they are not putting themselves or others at risk by speaking openly and honestly at these meetings. It strikes me that one reason the survey's response rate was so very low, which was a big concern in the summary, is that your employees are scared. I'm also wondering how this data will be collected from these meetings and how it will be shared with the community. Finally, it has been at times disheartening to witness how some members of our community find it easy to marginalize special education students and those with mental illness, autism, or behavioral disorders. It has been suggested to me on more than one occasion that I couldn't possibly know what it is like to work with these kids, so consequently I'm not in any position to ask questions and challenge us to do better. These kids are cast as others, inscrutable, uncontrollable, and therefore their care and education should be subject to less scrutiny. Putting aside the fact that I have worked in a special education classroom and an assisted living home, and I have had a 3-hole paper punch thrown at my head, and I have an autistic son who struggles mightily with anxiety and emotional regulation, I believe it is incumbent on all of us to be willing to look critically and thoughtfully, to ask questions, and to do the very best we can with the resources we have for these children and their families. I want to make sure that when we talk about a 21st century learning environment, that special education students are a part of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Charlie? Rebecca Needs will be up next.
Charlie Eastham, 953 Camden Street in Iowa City. We have 3 kids who are way past the Iowa City School District. I want to talk about the Special Education Culture and Climate Survey as well. And we'll start off by following up or agreeing with the previous speaker's comments about the in-person meetings that started actually yesterday, and how staff members are going to be able to participate in those meetings without any apprehension of further retaliation. And I hope you'll discuss that when you reach this item on your agenda. The second part of my comments have to do with my almost despondency, I guess, at the level of staff responses indicating that supervisors, administrators are approachable for questions or to deliver bad news. That's half of the responses of representative. That's half of the people working in special education don't say that they're not at the moment in the district able to fully participate in doing their task of providing education for special education students. And I just don't see how that could have developed, or how we can continue with that level of inability to be a professional in this area. I have expressed this before in front of you, I think. I'm very interested in the disparities in educational outcomes among racial groups and ethnic groups in the district. And I am apprehensive that we will be able to address those issues well as we go forward if there is as much retaliation or cultural that's in areas of where people are trying to do better work racially as there is in special education. I realize that's a concern I think we have. Finally, the level of retaliation expressed by staff who are in special education is going, I think, to require substantial focused work on, unfortunately, you as board of directors. My initial reaction in many of these areas is to blame the superintendent. I don't think that's necessarily appropriate at this point in time. And nor do I think it's necessarily appropriate to blame any single staff members. This may be a much more systemic issue, and I think we'll have to do more concerted effort to change the culture so that everyone can participate, rather than simply pointing at specific administrators. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Rebecca?
Good evening, Rebecca Needs, Iowa City Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm the VP of Public Policy, and I'm here to echo what some others have stated before who signed on to the letter. We also signed on. I represent about 1,000 member businesses who feel very strongly that, and you know this, we live in a global environment, and having a competitive workforce and providing strong schools to our students is vitally important. And by strong schools, to me that means excellent teachers, giving teachers and students the tools they need, and providing a strong environment in which to learn. And from your facilities master plan, it looks like we have a little work to do in this area, and that's understandable since we're in a growing community. But I'm here to encourage you to support the full GEO bond. Hate to see it cut up the facilities master plan. I think that will fracture our community. That's a word that's been used a lot, but I feel that's an excellent word, actually. It's time to bring back pride in our schools, not just in our students, but in their environments. It's time to unite as one community, and to me that means one vision and one vote, and not going back. So I ask you tonight to support the full facilities master plan through the entire GEO bond in one bite. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. And with that, that's the end of community comment. Next item on the agenda is the business consent agenda. Entertain a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to pull item 10 and 12 from the consent agenda.
So 10 is PSYOP and 12
is, yeah,
Sylvan. Entertain a motion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda absent items 10 and 12 as pulled by Director Hemingway.
Is there a second?
Second.
Phil, the bills?
Yes, Brian and I did the bills. I went through, had a couple of questions on some things that I discussed with Leslie Finger and pursuing those.
I had a question on some concrete, but Leslie was able to answer that question. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Liebig, Hemingway, Rotland, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea and Deloach abstaining.
Kim, just one point. On your motion, it has 10 and 11, but it should have been 10 and 12.
Oops. I'll make that change now. Thank you very much.
All right, moving into board work. The first item on the agenda is the facilities master plan listening post update. And as committed, we completed 3 listening posts over the last 2 weeks at Kirkwood Elementary, Wood Elementary, and Borlaug. Thank you for those who participated. We had 20 to 30 people at each session, and we were discussing the facilities master plan and the bond, which many people spoke to tonight. We followed our typical format of providing information up front, then breaking into small groups and having discussion, and then each group reported out. And the report out notes are primarily what's in the packet. We also had almost 1,700 people provide input in October, November through Thought Exchange, and a short summary is also in the packet. So those are the 2 things that are in the one attachment. Our next steps are to continue our facilities master plan and GO bond discussion tonight in our work session. And then at this point, at least, we're planning a special board meeting on January 31st. Based on the critical path schedule for the bond vote in September, we need to determine the project and the scope of the bond by the end of January. So we're going right to January 31st. So we've been saying no pressure on the school board members here, about 7 days now. So with that, I'd like to suggest we move and focus our time on the work session, but I'd leave it open for discussion. We'll move on to the work session. Sounds good.
I just wanted to thank the people that came out and that have engaged through Thought Exchange and in person with the listening posts or through email or other one-on-one conversations via phone or in person. It's always helpful to hear people's thoughts and take the pulse of the community.
Absolutely. All right, moving into teaching and learning. The first item on the agenda is the Student Climate Survey Task Force. Steve?
I'm going to turn that over to Kingsley to reintroduce our guests or welcome them back.
Yes, welcome back.
So first and foremost, before we get started, I just want to say thank you to the board. Also, thank you to the University Public Policy Project, Dr. Sarah Bruck and Tessa Harin, I think I'm saying the name right. They just do a wonderful job. Working with them has been just transformative throughout this entire experience. One of the things that, just to kind of give the public a brief overview is, we had the Student Climate Survey that was done last school year, the end of last school year. We presented the report, the findings, and then we came back to y'all with that particular report and said that we'd like to have a community task force look at the recommendations and prioritize the recommendations. And so this report directly speaks to this. I'm just talking without getting to the presentation, so I apologize. One of the key points that I know that Dr. Bruck is going to mention as well, and there's been some comment on as well, is the committee. And so trying to ensure that we get as many voices to the table as possible. And so I will say that this was a very deliberative effort. We've heard some concerns not only at the board table, but also my email inboxes and conversations amongst ourselves about committees and wanting to ensure that, again, we have a wide range of folks at the table, and that was important. One of the other pieces that I wanted to make sure that was discussed was, from a committee standpoint, ensuring that we had a majority-minority committee. And so what that means is that the majority of the folks on the committee were people of color. That was important. That was something that was stressed throughout the process and as we worked through the committee process. And I think that committee process took about, a couple of days. Not only necessarily just getting the applications, but a couple of days. And so I just want to highlight that because it doesn't get discussed a lot, but it was just important that we made sure the committee really was focused on matching some of those demographics that we talk about in a lot of circumstances. So without further ado, I'll give you Dr. Bruck.
Thanks, Kingsley. So did you guys get reports? No? That's good. All right, well, so the first couple things I'm going to say to you tonight, I'm just going to go through in a little bit more detail than Kingsley about the recruitment. There was multiple ways that people were recruited to the task force. All the parents were sent a thing through PowerSchool. We sent out emails to community groups, reached out to some people that have done previous work with the school district and engaged in community things in the past. We also put posters in public places like libraries. They looked like this. They were posted all over for a couple of weeks. One of the things that we did, we were very happy with in terms of what we were trying to do when we were thinking of who to have on the committee on the task force, was we wanted to make sure that each of the key stakeholder groups was represented. So one of the ways that we did that was we broke things into 3 different groups. We had people that are staff and administrators at the district, people that are district liaisons and community groups, and parents and students. And then you can see underneath those sort of each of the groups that we wanted to have represented in some way. So in terms of, like Kingsley said, we took a couple of days. We had people apply, and they had to tell us a little bit about themselves. And specifically, we looked in a lot of detail about, we asked them to share with us a short statement as to why they wanted to be on the committee and the task force. One of the things that we used to select the participants was the ability of the person to represent one of the key stakeholder groups that I just showed on the last slide, interest in promoting equity issues in the district, experience working with schools and students, and also we wanted to make sure that, as Kingsley said, given that the content of the task force meetings was going to be about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, we wanted people that had experience in this area if possible and represented diverse viewpoints on that. So the composition, as Kingsley said, was majority-minority, and I think that that really was very beneficial for our purposes. Just a reminder about why we were there in general. A lot of what we were talking about has to do with the equity goal of the district, so it's your goal in your statement, so I won't remind you what it says, but it does provide sort of the large context for why I'm here today. I wanted to reiterate what Kingsley said, that this is one part of a longer-term project. The first phase of this project was the student survey that we did back in February, and we call that a needs assessment. It gave us an insight into what is currently going on in your district, currently meaning last year. After that, we provided you with 3 key focus area policy briefs in which we showed you what the key findings were in 3 different areas: teacher and mentor relationships, inclusive classrooms and climates in your school, and disciplinary environment and equity. Within each of those 3 target areas, we also focused on what are the strategies that other districts have done around the country that show some evidence of effectiveness, and then based on those different strategies that have shown research effectiveness, evidence of effectiveness, we made recommendations. What you asked us to do after that was to convene this multi-stakeholder task force, and that's what we did to collect this information. Before I go over what we found with the task force, I just wanted to reiterate the context in which we made these recommendations and the task force members thought about them. What I'm showing you here is just a couple of the key findings from that student survey that really help to reiterate that, one, there are systematic patterns of difference or disparities between the experiences that students have in your schools by race and socioeconomic status. On all positive things, things like teachers showing you personal regard or equitable treatment or supportive treatment, racial minority students, in particular black students, always say that they have lower things, worse relationships with teachers, not as positive relationships with teachers than white students. Similarly, you find socioeconomic disparities where lower socioeconomic students report having less positive experiences than students that have higher socioeconomic status. And the same thing with the negative experiences where African American students and socioeconomic students of low status are more likely to say they have these negative experiences. The last thing I wanted to say about the context is since February, a lot of things have happened in your district. And so one of the things that was very apparent, we had the task force meetings throughout the fall, so that was coming up to the election and right after the election. And so this is something that very much animated lots of the conversations we had in the task force meetings. And the one thing that I would say here that I'll reiterate in a minute is it really created a greater sense of urgency that these issues are not just something that we found on a survey and that some of us are more interested in knowing more about than others. It really came to the fore in a big way. So the goal of the task force was to gather the input from these key stakeholder groups, like we've mentioned before, and go over the policy brief recommendations. The way we structured the meetings was we had our large group. We broke people into small groups. We asked small groups to think about strengths and weaknesses of each of the recommendations and to also think about what are the kinds of considerations that the district should give if they were to implement each of these recommendations. We also went through exercises of prioritizing the recommendations and then collected written feedback from everybody after every meeting in order to make it so that if people didn't say something out loud that they really wanted to share with us, they still had an opportunity to do that. So the recommendations that were considered, there was 11 of them. These are drawn from the 3 policy briefs that were published given to you guys in August. 6 of them have to do with teacher and mentor relationships. 3 of them have to do with school climate. 2 of them have to do with creating inclusive classroom environments particularly, and 1 has to do with a disciplinary environment. So the first thing that I'm going to go over is that we had lots of discussions. Our meetings were very long. The people that were there were very dedicated. They had a lot to say and a lot to share. And so what I'm first going to tell you is some of the key themes that came out in terms of climate. So climate was something that we talked about on each of the days, because climate is something that is related to teacher relationships and mentor relationships and just about everything else that happens in the school. And so it came up a lot. So the first theme that sort of went across all of the recommendations that we discussed was this sense of urgency. Not just because of what happened pre and post-election, but a lot of the task force members repeatedly mentioned that they think that the district has some sense of urgency in needing to address these issues. A second theme was inclusivity, or being more inclusive. So one of the things that came out very strongly was that when we think of equity issues, that we're talking about all students and the whole community. We're not talking about specific groups of people, that this is really equity issues and inclusion issues have to do with everybody. The third theme was equitable. So the idea here is that they would like to see things done that are consistent and in alignment with the district's own equity goals. The next one is committed, so some sense of commitment, that we don't just talk about it, but we actually are committed to doing something actionable to fix it. Collaborative. This came up a lot in terms of task force members really appreciating the opportunity to have their voices be heard and wanting to have more opportunities to have that kind of collaboration in decision-making processes. And the last one here in terms of climate themes is extensive. So this one was really speaking to the idea that it's hard to just target one particular area with teachers or students, and so we need to think of it as a more extensive sort of systematic issue. The second set of themes is specifically about training. So a lot of the recommendations have to do with training staff and teachers. And so a lot of the conversation was around what kind of training, what kind of things should we do about that. So before I say the specific recommendations, the themes here, the first is prioritizing training. So a lot of people in the task force mentioned the idea that training of teachers and staff is something that needs to happen first. So in terms of thinking about the chicken or the egg comes first, a lot of people said they thought that this is something that has to happen before other kinds of change can happen. Another is comprehensiveness. So this meaning don't just train the teachers, train everybody in the whole district, that teachers aren't the only ones that interact with students. Continuous, this is really speaking to the idea that we need long-term training, not just one-off trainings or something that's only temporary or short-term in order to see meaningful change. Accountable, this one speaks to the idea that if you're going to implement new initiatives or programs or changes in practice, that you need to evaluate them in some way so that you can see whether or not that training is working. So in that way, being accountable for outcomes. Practical, this one speaks to the idea that you can do trainings that you might not be able to practically apply or that you can't see how you practically apply them. And so many of the people on the task force said that that was a very important component to any training that was given. The next one is quality. So the desire for having high quality training, that one speaks for itself. The next one is supported. So there was a lot of discussion of the idea that you train people and then you don't support their efforts to try to change their practices. And so you have to do something on the back end after you've trained them to support them in trying new things. And the last one is flexible. This speaks to the idea that different teachers, different districts, schools have different priorities, different ways of doing things. And so the training needs to be flexible to sort of fit within the context that it's in. Okay, so those were the guiding themes across all of the recommendations. Across all of the recommendations, what we did was we found that, after looking through all of the material that we collected in these meetings, we came up with 3 top priorities that the task force really spoke about a lot and we think prioritized pretty strongly. The first is that the district should adopt a school and district-wide strategy for addressing disparities in student experiences. That sounds very broad. Many of the other recommendations were more sort of micro or individual based, and so this one is really saying you want something that's comprehensive. You saw that coming out in the themes. The particular model that gained a lot of support and was talked about very positively was the restorative justice model. The restorative justice model, in case you're not familiar with it, is usually contrasted with models that are more punishment based when it comes to disciplinary climate and how to deal with student behavior problems. The other positive thing about a restorative justice model is that it focuses more on repairing harm and building relationships. And so one of the reasons why this model seemed to have so much support from task force members is that it sort of did two things at once. It helped to deal with disciplinary inequities. It would reduce the use of suspension and expulsion, so punitive sanctioning policies, and also build school community by furthering and enhancing teacher relationships with students. So that's the first one that received a lot of support. So that's the top recommendation, 1 out of 3. In the report that you guys have and that I think was posted on board docs, one of the things we have in there is quotes. And so we had people on the research team that were very good note takers, took really good notes on what people said. And so one of the things we've put in the report is we've sort of sprinkled in there some quotes from people on the task force so that you get a sense of what people were saying in their own words. The second top recommendation was that the district provide training to all staff, teachers, and administrators, specifically to improve knowledge and awareness of diversity, equity, and inclusiveness issues. Like I said before, the task force members thought wholeheartedly and there was a lot of support for this, that this is something that has to happen before anything else happens. The things that were identified specifically were things like cultural competency and especially implicit bias. The idea that people need to be aware of ways of thinking about race and inclusion and equity that might broaden everybody's horizons in a positive way. The third and last top recommendation of the task force is that the district should actively recruit and retain district staff, teachers, and administrators of diverse backgrounds. There was a lot of conversation, not just on the day that we talked about this specific recommendation, about the importance of this, and especially the identification of why this is a positive thing for the district to do. So I have here listed in the bullet points several of the reasons mentioned for the reason why this is a good idea. The first is having positive role models in the schools. The second is increasing the likelihood of strong teacher-student relationships and the mentoring of all students. One of the things that we found in the student survey was that African American students and low socioeconomic students were much less likely to have positive relationships with their teachers or mentored relationships with teachers specifically. And the last reason being that it would improve the relationship between school and communities that tend to be underrepresented in the schools. So the task force also talked about sort of these other considerations. For now that we've given these recommendations to the district, what should the district be thinking about in moving forward with these recommendations? First, the task force members advocated for very much advocated for the idea that things should be evaluated. The idea that we want to know on a regular basis whether or not the programming initiatives that the district tries work, and holding everybody accountable for that. An additional part of that was interest in having these evaluations be made public so that it increases transparency and trust among all of the key stakeholders, that everybody knows what's going on, everybody knows what works, and that seemed very positive. So in terms of next steps, one of the things that I think is clearly a takeaway here is that your district is very well positioned to take meaningful and concrete action towards achieving your goal that all students can achieve at high levels and have equitable classroom environments. The district and I have been following a very successful research partnership model that has been used in other places in the country very successfully. We would like to continue doing that and working collaboratively with you to help you move forward in these efforts. So in part, we would like to reiterate, we, the Public Policy Center researchers, would like to reiterate what the task force members have also said, which is we strongly encourage you to evaluate any programmatic initiatives that you have in order to see whether or not some of these things are changing, and if they're not, how to go about understanding when it works, when it doesn't work, and why that is. So I think, the other one I would say, and then I'll close, is we also strongly recommend that you continue to collect data that will allow for these kinds of evaluations. The first and foremost one would be to continue to annually collect the student survey data, as well as additional forms of data collection that make it possible to tell whether or not there's evidence that things are working or not. And that's it.
And I'm going to chime in here. Again, just thanking the Public Policy Project and obviously the work of the committee for everything they've done. I specifically asked for us to put some cost estimates because the Public Policy Project has been able to get grants and it's just done a wonderful job as far as funding this project without necessarily, outside of my time, anything from the district. And so huge thanks for them for all the money they've been able to put forth and all the data analysis because frankly, as I'm helpful and with some of the things, they do a lot, if not most, like 95% of all that work that comes into putting the report together. So it's very important to acknowledge that. I do want to mention a couple of key points that Dr. Buck focused on. That accountability piece is huge. I think we've talked about it a number of times. One of the other things, or at one of our education committee meetings, I think that Trustee Stumbo was talking about asking different questions. And so as board members, asking different questions and how important it is to ask different questions so you can not only hold the administration accountable, but also the teachers and staff accountable as well. And so that was a huge theme that came across from this. Not only is it important for the report that got put out, but as we've been working on a variety of different initiatives that I hope to come back to you with when we talk about the equity plan, we are spending a lot more time on that accountability piece. And so making sure that we're measuring what our teachers and staff and our administrators are learning in the particular programs, and obviously also how our students are doing. I had a quick conversation with Chris and Latasha, or excuse me, Director Lynch and Director Deloach before the meeting and talking about Avid and how I've seen some data that excites me. And that, again, talks about the accountability that's important in making sure that we look at the measurables when we're talking about our students and looking at the measurables when we're talking about our programs. I do just want to say, on top of the evaluation, just the need for support. I'm blessed by admin team as well as Steve's leadership to get the support to do this type of work. My only request outside of the discussions that we have is that, we just continue to have that support from you. Nationally, when you do this type of work, especially when we're talking about equity, whether that be racial equity, whether that be equity as far as disability is concerned, equity as far as socioeconomic status, the rubber hits the road. You get to having some meaningful, hard, tough questions that really gets at people's feelings and hopefully moves them into a positive way and ultimately benefits our students. So that request I have for you is an important request for me just because we need that support. I need that support in order to make sure that this work is being done well, being held accountable, and obviously, again, benefiting all of our students. One of the things that you don't necessarily isn't thrown on the report is that I get calls from different UAN networks, whether that be Waterloo and Des Moines, come to mind and asking us, what we're doing in the district, excited about the partnerships. And so, we are an innovative district that does look at these things, and it's important that you know that, and I'll try to throw that in a report next time I get an opportunity to. So thank you again, I appreciate it.
So Kingsley, to that point, I think while board action isn't necessarily required, I think we should consider a motion to accept the recommendations and direct administration to take action on the top 3 recommendations. Would that look like help?
Yes.
Are you making that motion?
No, but I'd entertain a motion to accept the recommendations of the report and direct
So moved.
administration to take action on the top 3 recommendations.
So moved.
Chris has a second. Questions for Sarah?
I'm curious about the, you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm curious about the first recommendation. What would it take to come, maybe you're not the right person to ask, someone over here, what would it take concretely to actually shift over to that model? I mean, that's been a pretty significant professional development commitment, right?
Right. So part of the, we're coming a little bit, not late to you, but, once we had the recommendations from the University Public Policy Project, we started working on some of those things. And, we wanted the committee to hone in to some of the key recommendations, and hopefully the committee didn't come back and say that, the restorative justice model was a poor model to use. But we got a lot of support from the committee in that work. And so right now we're testing it, quote unquote, piloting it at a couple of our schools, looking at some comprehensive plans using that particular model, how we can add it to our MTSS process, how we can add it to our disciplinary protocol. And so we're doing it at 3 of our schools, Kirkwood, Southeast, and Northwest. I think the committee, as you kind of heard from the presentation, is interested in a more expansive model. And so we're testing it out. We're working with the Conflict 180 group to find what works from that perspective and then look at expanding in future years. So to answer your question more, directly, yes, it's possible. It's been done in other districts. It's just really trying to figure out how we can use this model within our current system.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, Phil, go ahead.
A couple of things. Kingsley called me and wanted me to express that I asked that the individual and my concern, and along with what you were talking about, transparency and getting the public the data, people can check on their individual schools and see the reporting in there. But that was a request that I made after seeing the City High presentation, and there's some things in there that I thought were good, and some things in there that need to be discussed further. But recruiting, I'm tired of hearing that we're not meeting that goal. And I'll tell a small little story. I spent 5 years in Belize running the largest cattle ranch in the country. We had a problem getting cowboys because we were the largest operation. There wasn't a history of cowboys in the country. So I could either get a 14-year-old kid who with the courage to put him on a horse and go out into a pasture and try and rope a jungle crazy Brahma, or I could go to Guatemala on an airplane and hire somebody who knew how to do it. And I don't understand why we have difficulty getting qualified, inspired, and inspiring candidates for our school. And I think too, our recruiters should be teachers, because I think they're the best recruiters. And I think if we have teachers go out and identify quality people, we should recruit like people recruit, actively go after them. We are a great place to live. We pay our staff very well. And I think it's for, and this was given to me by a staff member. I mean, I know for as long as I've been really paying attention to things, it's always been a topic, and for 20 years it's been an issue. And it seems to me that we're not seriously addressing it, and it's crucial. It's been identified as crucial, and I think we've got to go after it. Also, in this, one thing that kind of comes out at me is, and I guess I'm going to page 16 in recommendation time allocation. I think that's huge. With just when you go into an elementary school classroom and they have the little in the corner of the chalkboard, the day, every minute is accounted for. And in this section 3, it says the strengths, it's easy to implement. I don't know how, I think that's a problem. And then in the weakness, it's the inflexible schedule. Well, the schedule is, that's one of the biggest things about school is the rigid schedule. Mm-hmm. So I think there's real challenges there with, where do you get the time? And we're putting greater and greater demands on our teachers. And I think I think the restorative justice discussion We've touched on it a couple of times, but I think that that's something we can, I think we should really get into. And also just the school culture, because school is a unique environment in and of itself. And making sure that everyone, and with our discussion with the students yesterday at the listening post, there's still, I don't think that, that there's clear, that both sides have clear expectations on what both are expecting of each other. And I think a dialogue, and I know I've talked with this with President Lynch before about a discussion on school culture and, clear expectations in the classroom and everything that way. So then, these concerns about improper punishment and things like that, if you know exactly consequences to actions, there should be no surprises, and it should be helpful for both sides.
Real quick to respond to some of the comments. So I appreciate Dr. Hemingway mentioning the school profiles piece. One thing that I should have let the board know is that as we were rolling out this information, we haven't gotten to all the schools, and so the profiles, some of their school profiles are out without us kind of having that conversation with the schools, and not necessarily in any type of way of hiding the information, because it's important information to get out there. But as you will see from the overall district climate report that you got, sometimes, even though you see green, green might not always be good if you're comparing that to district average, and red might not always be that bad. And so those are some of the concerns that I've had with some of the majority of the staff as we talk about the school profiles. They've just felt, a particular way about some of those concerns and how we could address them. I'm really glad from a public policy standpoint, we're looking at the next iteration of the survey and trying to incorporate a lot of the feedback that we have gotten from the teachers and staff as far as not only maybe how we can not necessarily change different questions, but make questions more readable for our students or simplify for our students, but also how we can ensure that we're getting the information that we truly want to get to move forward. From a recruitment standpoint, I definitely agree with Director Hemingway. I think the greatest focus, I will say, for this upcoming hiring season would be our teachers. I think that for the numbers, you see that that's our greatest need. We have done we're already working on some new innovative things. Steve actually, Superintendent Murley actually gave me a couple of contacts that will, I think, I wouldn't say change the game, but push us forward a lot more quickly as far as looking at diverse teachers and staff. That organization is Diverse K-12. The invoice is literally on my desk right now to kind of sign off and move with the contract for your approval. And so those are some of the things. And then I think that Director Hemingway also made a good point about getting teachers to actually actively recruit. I have known for a long time now that I'm only one person, and I had a great conversation with Barbara Hawk, who's a retired teacher, and Diana Henry, who's a retired teacher, last night as far as how they could help the district in that particular way. It's actually a model that other districts use. When I've been at some conferences, the Omaha Community School District has had teachers there actively recruiting, and so they're able to give information that obviously I'm not able to give as far as classroom experiences and just overall feelings of being there from the district perspective. And so great recommendations, and we'll incorporate those in kind of our recruitment strategy moving forward.
Well, I think it's, we've known it's been a problem long enough. We need to be actively identify talent and go after it.
I have a comment about since we were talking about recruitment. It's much more complicated than it is at face value, the recruitment and retainment of diverse staff. Because it's not just, there's multiple employers in this area that are having the same problem, unless okay. And some of it is we all need to collaborate a little bit more about making this community a little bit more receptive to people who are coming from diverse backgrounds, because what is happening, especially since I've been here a long time, I've had friends come and go because they struggle living here. Livability for people of color here is not as great if you were not a person of color. And that's just a fact. I've built an entire organization off the fact that that is a problem. So I think that there are multiple pieces. I think that there's some opportunity. I think what we lack is not finding ways to collaborate with multiple people who have the same problem about how to bring diverse folks in, because just because they're coming in, they may have a spouse or a significant other who is also going to be looking for a job. And if they get here and that person can't get a job, then I'm not going to stay here, because we both want to work and have income. And so if there is any opportunities to be creative about even where we look for teachers, I've mentioned this before in talking with some college ed folks, there are opportunities for people to take their 4-year degree and get some additional education and become teachers. So I'm going to look at African American history department as a potential opportunity that we can get some of those folks and they can turn into teachers. I just think being creative about finding where diverse populations of people are, and unfortunately most of our college of educations, they are failing at even getting students to come into their college education program. So, the problem is not just the district, the problem is national. 80% of teachers in the United States are white women. So, and that's for a reason. It keeps being that way for a reason, because we duplicate ourselves. So I just think we need to start looking outside the box about, we can get more teachers to talk to other people about being more teachers, but we got to do something more than that. I don't know. I just think sometimes we do the same thing and we expect different results. And so how can we be more creative, looking at other places about how we bring in talent? Talent is talent, and some people have natural teaching skills. They just need to learn some of these additional pieces. But I'm just putting that out because this will probably be on here for a real long time. Even though at this point, I think 40% of our students are students of color. Nationally, half of our students are students of color in our schools. So that problem's not going away, and we all need to get creative about how we do that. The other thing I would suggest here, now that we have this data and this opportunity from public policy, et cetera, is just like we have a facility master's plan that's 10 years out, we need to do something about this in some kind of timeline over years, and know that we're going to support this with the appropriate infrastructure, because the support thing is kind of a theme that pops throughout this entire thing, is the support. I can teach you about implicit bias, but implicit bias gets locked in your head at 3 years old. So what do I do to help you to continue to counter your implicit bias if you're coming into our district at 36? So I think that that's something we need to start, not just making plans for what our buildings look like, but what do we want our climate to be like, and what pieces are we implementing and doing? And we have some of these. This didn't cost the district a dime. Thank you, Sarah, for all of the work that you did to get the funding for this. It didn't cost us a dime. And so I'm just saying, we have these opportunities. Let's utilize them, but let's look long-term for those kindergartners who's going to hit high school. I appreciate that we have a Students Against Hate and Discrimination, but I wish we didn't have to have a group that was Students Against Hate and Discrimination, honestly. So, I guess that's kind of my, we have an equity plan. How do we turn that equity plan into a timeline about getting these things accomplished and to something that is a little bit more consumable for our community to be able to understand?
It'd be a cultural or climate master plan.
A master plan.
And we can talk about what that looks like.
Will we work the equity plan to incorporate some of these things and come back to you?
No, but this is a long-term, multi-year.
Yeah. No, definitely.
How do we sustain it,
over time, and we can continue that conversation.
Can I just one follow-up on that? Maybe not so much with number 3, but with number 1 and 2. This kind of goes to what I was saying before. I want to do those things, but they're all sort of in the form of, we're going to do more of this, we're going to do more of that. And I guess I'd have more confidence that it's really going to happen if maybe there was more explicit discussion on what we're going to do less of instead. We've talked about number 2 with the implicit bias training requiring finding space in the PD schedule, and now we got number 1 that might require finding space in the PD schedule, or like Phil says, space in the school day, or all the accountability, follow-up, measurement. Somebody's got to do it. Are we going to hire more people to do that? And if so, where are we going to get it from? So do you have any thoughts? I know it's a spring in it, but any thoughts about what trade-offs would be involved in doing more of these things?
Well, I mean, part of it is, and we've talked about this in our trainings and discussion, and so when we talk about equity in general, we need to stop talking about it as an added thing and talk about it as a plate. And so all these different, I mean, it's not trying to make my department, the all-seeing department. It's more just looking at it from the standpoint of when we talk about, we have a special education discussion next, and we talk about, we had people from the community comment talking about the facilities master plan. I mean, equity is a part of literally everything that we're doing. And so it's more about how we can incorporate and infuse that more into what we're currently doing. And then I think the accountability piece is huge because, one of the things I think that Director Rotland had mentioned a long time ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, if we're not doing things that are working, I think that even somebody mentioned today, we got to change, we got to do something else. And so that's part of it. And so it's evaluating our programs that we're currently doing. It's getting better metrics. It's understanding that if we're not seeing some of the growth that we need to see, then we need to change, pivot, and move to some other things. And so I think those two pieces, we look at equity as a plate and include it in everything that we do, and then also that accountability piece and really kind of enhancing that to be more meaningful. I think that is kind of a long answer to your question. Obviously, there's going to be some challenges that I think Director Hemingway mentioned, but I'll be honest with you, I think we're in a good place, especially with the work with the Public Policy Project and where our staff and admin team are at. It's just the constant push. I'm hoping to come back to you in a couple of months at the end of the school year with some good data, some changes to some programming to see what we can do differently to really boost those scores and add some diversity to our team.
And can I say this one ad? Some of these things in here is one of those human rights things. Some of these things that this is coming down to is I want to be treated, and some of these things do not require training. Seriously, I mean, honestly, listening to our students, some of this is, I don't want to be treated different because I look different, or because I'm more protected from the sun because I got more melanin than you, or because I pray differently than you. So some of these are basic, fundamental things. Yes, we need to point it out so people can recognize that they are making assumptions about people based on their own biases, but at some point, when does it come down to that stop mistreating our children because they look and live differently than you? So I don't feel like I mean, maybe I'm being unrealistic about that we should treat people kindly. I mean, I could be wrong. But I'm just saying some of these things in here, I mean, there's pages and pages and pages of me wanting to read and say, well, just cut that crap out. Stop treating people poorly. I mean, yes, we can do implicit bias and we can do cultural diversity training. We've been doing that stuff for 20 years, but at some point, it's got to come down to just cut it out. Just stop. Like, stop mistreating children because they're different, because their mama don't make as much money as your mother. You know what I mean? Some of this, yes, we need to go through this whole, I feel so bad kind of stuff. We can do all the tears, but in reality, some of this just needs to just stop, because we continue to allow it to be in our system. We're agents of allowing this to continue to happen in our system because we refuse to stop because it's uncomfortable. So some of this, we need to push past this whole discomfort and just cut that crap out, honestly, excuse my language, and treat our students with some more dignity, and that they have human rights and they should be valued as human beings. And some of this other stuff is nice, it's beautiful, we can do surveys and different things like that, but some of it is just learned behavior that needs to be unlearned. And how much more time and much money are we going to keep spending on to tell people not to do that? Like, I mean, seriously, we're investing a ton of money to tell people to treat our children fairly if we really come down to it. So, I mean, that's just my thought after going through this. It's necessary. I think it's important to pull this up to highlight it that it's a problem. But then at what point, what's the 10-year plan on cut that out?
And with that, I think we have a motion on the table, and I think we should vote on it. But before we do that, Sarah, I want to say thank you. Thank you to you and the committee, Kingsley. It was extremely well done, again. And I thought the executive summary was great. You're clear and concise, and I appreciate, and we appreciate just this conversation we're having, boiling it down to the top three so we can actually focus. And I think to the question on focus, I think linking with the strategic plan, if we're always linked to the strategic plan, we'll keep driving the focus, and you just did an outstanding job of that. And thanks, I think, for setting a new standard on having people, the whole committee process and recruiting and picking the committee was outstanding. And think that's a model going forward. So anyway, thank you to your committee.
You're welcome.
With that, further discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
Kingsley, I'm going to ask you once we're done.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Is there anything else you need from us, and when would you like to come back, and will you build this into the going conversation on the equity plan?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, with that, the next item on the agenda is the special ed staff culture and climate survey. Steve?
Sure, just give a quick brief introduction to it and then turn it over to Jane. We've worked very closely with the ICEA and the ISEA to address the issues that arose as part of the state audit, and the result of that was this survey, which Jane's going to talk to you a little bit about, and then was, as was referenced earlier, some follow-up activities that are currently underway. So, Jane.
Thank you. Once again, we turn to the University of Iowa Public Policy Center to help us with the development and the distribution and the tabulation of this particular survey. And we thank them for that work. It was very helpful to get that information, and you'll see that information in the attachments that were part of the board docs for tonight. As Steve mentioned, this was follow-up to one of the citations in the corrective action plan from the DE accreditation visit back in May. And so in looking at that information, the administrative team felt it was really important to follow up with the information that was provided from that interview team. So I'd like to refer to page 4 in the document where it talks about the implications. One of the concerns I think that has been readily cited was the response rate that we got from the staff where the survey was distributed to. Because of that, we felt like we needed to reach out one more time and use a different strategy or intervention in order to gather more information. As you saw, there were 24% of our staff that was provided with the opportunity to respond that did, and so we're missing some responses or some information from a large group of people that are part of our special education team. Another concern was we had a fairly high response rate in that middle of the road, maybe, and we weren't quite sure why maybe was selected as a response. Was it they weren't sure what the question was asking for at that time? Was it the way that the question was phrased? Did it have to do with, I'm not sure if what you're asking was really retaliation? I maybe need to, I'm not quite sure enough to answer yes or no to that particular question. And we had, again, several chunks where there was about a third of the responses were in that, that maybe category. So I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding about the retaliatory actions that were being asked about. So with that, we felt it was important to provide the staff with an individual opportunity with someone coming in that is what they do with their role, to get some questions answered and to get more specific information. So on page 5 then, as you're aware, Jim Tickey from the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services has come out. We worked with him and along with the ICEA in deciding what that process might look like, and we took advantage of his experience and background to guide us through what that could possibly look like. So for the past 2 days, yesterday and today, and then again tomorrow, we have provided opportunity for staff to come and have a more in-depth conversation with someone about the activities that have been reported in that DE report. There was some question about how did we ensure that was a safe environment for staff to come in and participate in. We tried to structure it so that it was an after-school time. We asked that the ICEA help support us in soliciting participation by staff. We opened that door to everyone on staff, whether they responded to the survey or not. They were invited to come. Either it might be again, or maybe they didn't feel comfortable participating in the survey but felt like maybe they would like to sit down and have a conversation after the survey data was posted. So we'll have a better idea of what's out there after tomorrow. We'll be sitting down with Jim and talking about the information that he was able to collect. It might tell us that we need to do more, maybe our participation even with this type of strategy. Staff didn't feel safe enough stepping forward again. I know that was one of the questions that one of our audience members had asked. I know that there's some sense with some of the staff that if they're not experiencing retaliation, that they really didn't feel a need to step forward. I'm fine, I'm comfortable, it's okay. So some of the participation might be based on that as well. But our hope is after the interviews are completed tomorrow that we'll have a better sense of what our next steps should be. We certainly understand that this is a systems piece as part of all the work that we're doing through the corrective action planning and working in collaboration with our implementation team and the implementation advisor. Some things that Kingsley and I had visited about was making sure that we have a very specific process laid out and that process for reporting any type of retaliation behavior, any type of harassment is a very clear process, that it's a safe process and very accessible to staff so that should those things occur, that we can get information from staff in a more timely way so that we're able to respond in a more timely way. Those are all things that will be works in progress, as we continue to move through. So my hope is after the interviews are completed tomorrow, we'll be able to sit down and plot a plan based on either what we find out or what we didn't find out.
Jane, is there anything you need from us?
I'd like to continue to provide updates to the board and updates for the public. I would like to add that Kristen Peterson and I, she invited me into a conversation with K-12 Insight. They've been providing some surveys, and just by coincidence, this was a year for a parent survey to go out with them. So we asked that survey get pushed out a little further to the calendar year. So that survey is scheduled to go out to parents this Friday, January 26th, to our special education parents. And there are a variety of questions that we've modified and wrapped around some of the concerns from the corrective action plan and around the use of seclusionary timeout. So some of those questions are specifically embedded in that survey. So that'll be another big piece of data that we're anticipating will help guide our work the next several months.
All right, discussion, questions?
Yeah, I've got a few. I understand, it's a fairly small representation, but when you are dealing with something this controversial as retaliation, I think that and you make a valid point by saying that there would be people that didn't experience, and why would you come in and give essentially a false, or excuse me, a negative response when you're looking for that type of response? But also, can people, and it's quite clear from the people who did respond that there is a tremendous amount of retaliation, and that it could be very likely that the people that didn't participate were fearful. And when all of the meetings are on school grounds, whether after school or whatever, we might have considered a off-site venue, maybe in a public library or something like that, where people might have felt a little more anonymous to come in and report than in the business shop. On the page 3, when we have 53 members indicated they had experienced retaliation of some type, that's 53 out of the people that took the survey. That's 59% of those that participated. That's very high. 43 members indicated they had experienced retaliation from district level supervisors and administration. That's 48%. That's alarming. 55 of the respondents felt comfortable reporting an observed violation to a supervisor. Well, that's 55% felt comfortable, but that also means that 45% didn't. So that's a concern. Also in here we have sightings or questions concerning people witnessing parents or parents of special ed students experience retaliation. And at any of these meetings, did we allow parents to come in and give their experiences about retaliation, or is this information that we're actively trying to seek?
At this time, we started with staff. So again, I think once we get the information back via these interviews, and as we continue to work with the association, I think that will help us identify some next steps. The hope is that since all these reports initially came from our staff, that we'll get more clarity and more information from these interviews in these next 3 days. So if it was a parent that was identified that was observed by a staff member being retaliated against, again, that helps us provide more information about next steps on that. One of the reasons that we selected school-based sites was we also wanted to make it convenient for staff. I certainly understand that that was a balance of what will make this easy for staff to be able to participate. So 3 separate sites in different areas of town were chosen to help solicit more response, more participation, as well as if it's at a school site, we were hoping we'd have a better shot at people coming in.
No, I understand the convenience part of it, and I think that's valid. But I think we could benefit from having a neutral site opportunity as well for staff and one for the community to come in, because it's concerning when you have staff saying they've witnessed this on parents, and that's unacceptable.
I would agree.
Also, we have in here that staff members indicated that they had experience of retaliation at the district and AEA supervisor and administrators, which, okay, I know we've got our own problems, but with the AEA, if we have identified that the AEA has given us problems and they're getting $6.4 million of our money and turned us into the state DOE, they're not out of this culpability either. And I would like that followed up on.
And that will be part of the follow-up. That, again, keeping in mind that these questions were asked with categories. So some of those categories were so we could glean the most information that we could.
Sure.
With that initial survey.
And I appreciate it, and I apologize. I'm not shouting at you. It's just a family trait of my voice elevating as I continue on. 43 out of the 53 staff members indicated that they had experienced retaliation from a district-level supervisor/administration. That's unacceptable on anything. And it's also unacceptable when the person who was in that supervisory position when these things occurred is laterally transferred into another position and kept on. I can't accept that. That's a huge problem, and it's a huge problem with trust in the community when we have an identified problem and we don't correct it, and no one involved with this has been held accountable. And
So Phil,
when I'm wrapping up, Chris, and I appreciate your latitude in letting me speak. But we talk about confidence in the community, and it's necessary for the bond passage and everything like that. This can undermine that more than any other discussion. And I feel that we have got to address this, it's unacceptable. There's other words I like to use. I'm using that too much. But for district-level supervisors or administrators to be recognized as this retaliation of culture, it is no longer should be discussed as if, but we have a huge retaliatory problem in this district. It has to be corrected. It goes to the very top as indicated by the data, and we have got to handle it, and it's upon us when it's at that level. And we've got to address it.
Let's start. I think we all agree with that, right? So there's an opportunity from a performance standpoint in terms of the results we're getting, and we want to get into that. We all think it's unacceptable, right? I will say, though, we need to set the example as well. So I think we can have this conversation. We can, be clear there's an opportunity. We all agree there's an opportunity, and let's get after it, right?
I agree. I agree.
Anybody who disagrees, it's not unacceptable.
This isn't a one and done with this survey.
Right.
Correct, exactly. And I couldn't agree more, and it's not an end to this discussion, and it needs to go beyond this, and I will entertain whatever direction that the president has for that, whether it goes to a work session or something along those lines and expanded. But we have got to make the correction. I asked Jane before the meeting on the search for a replacement. We should conduct well, I'm just going to make a quick, that we should conduct a very extensive external and internal search for a replacement. But I would say myself, I would be very, it would be very welcoming and be a great sign to the community if we brought in some excellent new blood in this area to help us with correcting the problems that have been illuminated very clearly in this report.
Can I just ask a few questions, or I didn't mean to interrupt you?
I say we can talk next steps on Phil's point. We can do that together.
Just wondering, so the survey was anonymous, right?
I'm
the survey
sorry.
itself was anonymous, right?
Yes, yes.
Was it, did it define retaliation?
It did not. Well, yes, it did initially talked about in the opening of the survey what defined retaliation, and that was the other piece that we weren't quite sure if people understood what the term retaliation meant. If people were talking about maybe hostile work environment or mistreatment in some other way, but retaliation of kind of that quid pro quo. If I do this, then certain things happen to me because of the decision that I made or the behavior that I made.
I mean, I think it'd be interesting maybe in future surveys to kind of break down, well, what sort of retaliation are you referring to? You know, and if it is, is it something about employment status, or is it something about just socially or whatever? But it'd be interesting just to see that. Also to see what is being retaliated against, you know, what acts they felt like they were retaliated for doing.
Yeah, it would help us in planning moving forward if we knew some of those specifics. So again, we're hoping to have better information after tomorrow night.
And I do agree, you know, with the basic feeling that to the extent that you can make it easier for people to feel comfortable doing this, find ways to do that. I think that'd be important. And I mean, I guess the other thing is, you know, we don't know, when you look at the number, if there are people who aren't working here anymore because of retaliation of one kind or another, maybe it just drove them away or whatever. I mean, they're not filling out the survey, so, you know, I have to take that into account too, I guess.
Absolutely. As stated that we don't have, that would be helpful.
Can I ask when this was implemented?
Pardon me?
When was this implemented?
The survey? This past October or November. November, excuse me.
And so just so I understand, we have 442 staff members, but only 108 responded. Is that right?
Special education staff, yes. Combination of support staff and teaching staff.
Majority of the staff didn't even respond to this.
76% did not respond.
Okay.
We did send the survey out twice.
Yep.
Okay. So
when it first was launched, people saw the heading and didn't realize that it wasn't just spam or junk mail. So we sent another round, and then some of our team leaders in our buildings helped promote that with the staff, saying this really is important to have your voice be heard with this. So please take the time to complete this.
Okay.
And I know you stated at the beginning, I apologize, I didn't catch it clearly. Who exactly conducted this survey?
This was done with the University of Iowa, the Public Policy Center, who completed the last survey as well.
Okay, so they did the survey, they compiled the data and everything like that.
Yep, everything went straight back to them.
Oh, super. Is it possible to get copies of the raw data that they collected?
Well,
Possibly. I mean, that would be a question left up for the policy project. I don't want to put it on them. I know they're here.
Yeah.
Some of the concern was that people felt like they were giving the information knowing that they wouldn't necessarily, it was anonymous.
No,
so,
I'm not asking for names and addresses. I'm just asking for the you know, if this is all of the data that they collected, great, but we've also many times been told we're cleaning up the data when we get it. Sometimes it'd be nice just to get the unfiltered report.
I would add one thing.
Yes, ma'am. Please.
You just come to
Sarah,
the mic.
if you just come to the mic.
So I would say one thing, which is I think the quantitative data would be fine to hand over to the district as is, and that's what we gave them. The qualitative answers, some of the follow-up questions about, tell me about the experiences so that you have some nuance to the answers. Given that it was conducted by an external agency, ourselves, for the reason being that you wanted to try to encourage as much participation as possible, that if there's a problem within the district, you want an external person to see the data.
Right.
Some of those qualitative responses, because they're so detailed in nature, could identify the person in a way that they no longer feel like they were anonymized, not because you know their name or their address, but the way that they describe the incident. And so for that reason, we didn't give the qualitative responses back to the district. What we did was we summarized them and sort of used a different, sort of said what the themes were, said what the different incidences were in a more general way, so that you still have the data, but it's anonymized enough that we feel like you wouldn't be able to tell who responded to the survey, just to keep that confidentiality secure.
That was interesting. I was wondering whether there were
From a
open-ended
research ethics
questions.
sort of standpoint.
Gotcha.
So we can provide that.
Thank you.
Where do we see that sort of summary of the open-ended questions? Is that in this document, or?
No, but we can provide that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
So one thing I just want to make sure is clear in all this, and let me start by saying, because one of the things I wanted to see was that our unions were very engaged, right? And we have very strong and highly functioning unions, I think, right? Is there any disagreement with that? Normally, if there's a challenge that we don't know about as management, you go to the union, you talk about it, and you figure out what's going on, right? So as we've talked with the union, I don't think it's clear in terms of the issue statement or the opportunity, and we are jointly working with the ICAA and SEIU, if I get it wrong, correct me, but to proceed with this work. And we've jointly agreed to bring in Jim, the mediator. And so you've agreed to things like locations and times and all other good stuff. But I just want to reinforce, right, we're actively working with our unions on the opportunity.
We've had extensive dialogue with them throughout this process. They were instrumental in working triangularly with us and with the Public Policy Center to develop and refine the questions. So we had the opportunity to go back and forth extensively with them to make sure that the questions were written in such a way that they thought they'd be accessible to their membership. They assisted us in getting the message out to the members that we had worked with an external third party to conduct the survey, worked with them after the initial round to publicize the second round, worked with us to look at the data after it came back, and then worked with us to talk about appropriate next steps, which included bringing in someone to help gain clarity. And I recognized that it was important that the people had the opportunity to talk to somebody who wasn't necessarily a representative of the district, nor a representative of the ICEA or the ISEA. And so we went outside, used their contact database to get a hold of the Federal Mediation and Conciliation
Again, I
Service.
don't want to go on this point too long, but given we have strong functioning unions, if there's something obvious and easy to be elevated, it would have been elevated through the union, right?
It may have. Again, we wanted to make sure that there were as many avenues as possible, and so that's why we worked with them to develop this.
But on a normal basis, that's what would happen. And again, that's why it's a little complicated. Sometimes with culture, it's hard to put your finger on exactly what, you know what I mean? And that's why we need to penetrate it more and push, and let's get this done. How fast can we do it? But I can't wait to see what's coming out of Jim, but I just want to make that point because sometimes, it feels like it's administration doing, no, it's not. This is a joint partnership that we're moving forward together, so.
We're very fortunate that they're willing to work that closely with us.
All right, further discussion? Again, no actions required, so. Jane, when do you think we'll hear back on next steps?
I don't think we have anything set up at this time, but I think
about
probably
this?
by next month.
You can let us know.
Yes, because we would like to do some follow-up then on the findings.
And that's when we'll get like the follow-up with these interviews and things you're doing right now.
All right, thanks, Jane.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the enrollment demographics and class size report. And I think we'll need to decide how much time we spend here because we could spend all night on this. It's one of our favorite reports.
We'll be
but-
brief. How about
Excellent. And we can always come back and talk this further, so.
Okay, thank you. You have the full report there that we gave you a punch that you can add to your binder with the reports we delivered to you earlier this fall, but tonight we have a report for you with enrollment, demographics, and class size. Amy and I are going to talk primarily about class size and some of the demographic information, and then Adam will pick up the middle part of our slides here with enrollment projections and any questions you might have on that. You'll probably remember you've received earlier enrollment projections, so you kind of already covered some of the information in that topic. The first slide here mentions certified enrollment, and the N on that certified enrollment is 13,981.63. And there's a couple other figures there to draw your attention to. One is head count, the 13,633, and then the Grant Wood Area Education Agency also uses a weighted enrollment, and that would just consider students in special ed programming. So it doesn't consider some of the other weighted enrollments that the Department of Ed uses to determine our funding. Enrollment head count, you can tell that we've seen a 2.2% increase with an increase of 296 students. And you see some trend lines there of that enrollment through the district and how it's continued to increase the last several years, dated back to 2007-8 in this diagram here in front of you. Open enrollment, this one is trending the other way, where we lose more students through open enrollment. This year we lost 415 students, which is a 7.8% increase from 2015 and 16. That number's continued to climb since 2007 and 8, the first year there on the graph. We do have some information that details reasons for families open and enrolling outside of the district. I think the most commonly cited reason involved students accessing another school's homeschool assistance program or homeschool program in one of those other districts. Intra-district transfers, intra-district transfers, this talks about students that are transferring to a school outside of their home attendance area. And so we have a wide range here. In some schools lose some students to that, and some schools stay pretty consistent there. So all the way from 1.7% and to up to 20.5% of some students transferring out of a school in our district. So bigger variance there. Again, there's charts that explain or that detail those breakdowns with the numerical value in the larger report. And then I think this is the part where we'll turn it over to Adam. He'll take the next 3 slides here about district growth.
Yeah, so since we just covered this in detail, I won't go into much. This is district-wide projected growth. This is projected head count growth. As you can see, and as we discussed last month, projection is that we'll continue to grow on a pretty steady pace that's very similar to the last 10 years, approaching 16,000 students, K-12 headcount by 2026-27. And that growth is fairly steady, especially early on during that period. The next slide is district growth. And this uses the last set of projections, not the current set of projections, because this is a comparison of this year's enrollment to the predicted. Obviously, the most recent projections didn't project for this year. And as you look through this list, you'll notice, there is some variation. I had mentioned during the last projections discussions, the biggest misses were Alexander and Wood, and that has to do with the difficulty of projecting enrollment when attendance boundaries are changing. Overall, though, the projections are within 1.5% of reality, and that's pretty consistent. You'll see secondary levels, both high school and junior high, overperformed the projections, elementary underperformed the projections. That's one of the reasons as we jump to this next slide, you see that in the new projections, there's more rapid growth projected at the high school level and then the junior high level, with the really most stagnant growth projected at the elementary levels, all of which still combines to fairly even growth throughout the next 10-year period.
Good evening, everyone. The next 4 slides or so related to demographics include information around race and ethnicity, socioeconomic status, English language learners, and special education students. During the 16-17 school year, we saw an overall increase, Latasha alluded to it earlier, in our minority population from 40.3% in 15-16 up to 41.6%. Largely, we saw shifts in the Black, Hispanic, and multiracial populations. We did see a decrease in our white population from 59.7% the year before to 58.4% this year. School districts use the number of students approved for free and reduced lunch as an indicator of socioeconomic status. We saw a range at our elementary levels at Lincoln with 10.6% of their students, to Twain 78.2%, North Central Junior High 17.4% compared to Southeast Junior High 45.7%, and Weston City West at 28% and City at 42.3%. We did see an increase from last year's percentage as well. Last year we were about 35.7% free and reduced lunch in the district, and this year we're up to 37.3%. It's also interesting, there's a table in there that shows the amount of change in our buildings since the 2007-2008 school years, and as I just quickly went through those sections, really Coralville Central, Horn, Kirkwood, Lucas, and Weber were some of the buildings that have grown significantly in our free and reduced populations. English language learner, we certainly brought this to your attention last year, but our programming continues to expand here. English language learners are those who speak a language other than English as their primary language. Saw a significant increase since 2007-2008, where we were serving 422 students to today, over 1,200 first through fifth year students. There are now 87 languages being spoken across the district, and our top 5 are English, Spanish, Arabic, Swahili, and French. And I compared that to what our top 5 were last year, and the top 3 remained the same, and we had a little switch with spots 4 and 5. This year, again, we had Swahili and French at 4 and 5, and last year we had Chinese and Swahili in there, so that was just interesting to note that way. As far as our special education students, depending on needs, some students receive additional supports through our special education programming. For funding purposes, students are weighted, and we look at overall head counts as well as the weighted enrollments. And if you look, since 2007-2008, overall we're declining in all those different statistics. This year we are serving 1,164 students in our special education program. The next several slides have to do with class size, broken down at both the elementary and secondary levels. Page 35 outlines the superintendent directions, updated as of our last board meeting with the latest information regarding those new parameters or goalposts. Pages 36 through 39 have tables that present class sizes based by grade by school. And the table is broken down to show both average homeroom class size as well as average class sizes for elementary literacy and math classes. Staffing is based on the latter. You can see then in the next 2 tables the breakdown for our K2 classrooms in the district as well as our 3-6. And so our range is from 14 students at the K2 level all the way up to 26. Again, staying nicely within those goalposts established. And then at our 3rd through 6th grade level, we range from 15 to 30 students in those classes.
All right, and then secondary-wise, you're getting a little different look on the presentation part here, but you do have those same frequency tables in the larger report if you're interested in looking at that aspect. But I have slides here for you on each of the junior high schools and then on each of the high schools. You see our averages are very close together. North Central Junior High is averaging 32 students per section, and you see a distribution of large class size to small class size. You have some anomalies in there, like the music and the PE classes in comparison to some smaller elective offerings that at times toy with averages, but the largest end count you can see on those frequency tables are what pulls the average, obviously, to a mean there. I think the other thing to note is that some of the data isn't consistent necessarily on what you would see on this chart, is not what you'll see on some of those more frequency counts, because we don't have all of those pieces represented in this larger table. So if you have questions on this, any specific data points as you're looking through that report, I can explain in further detail why there might be some variance between those two.
On the math and the per student per section, does that include sections where they're non-ELL or excuse me, no, they're non-IEP, but they might be teen learner? There might be teen teachers with a small group of students that bring the average down, like on math, or are those taken out of these numbers?
If it's a team taught section, we wouldn't count that in half. We would just count that as one teacher per. That's the amount of students in that section. Some of those are included. Now, if it's a standalone sheltered ELL class, that would not be included in these. But if we had say a Algebra 1 class that included a co-taught teacher with special education students in there, that would be included. So Northwest Junior High, you see an average of 29 students, the same distribution there with large class size to small class size, and then the total students in there as well. Same type of look here for Southeast Junior High with an average of 30 students per class there with those same distributions. And then very similar look here with our high schools. Both high schools have an average, if you look, just toggle between the two here, West High at 30 and then City High at 29. But if you go to those frequency graphs in there, you see they both land at exactly 28.6. That's because we've removed some of the music sections out of that. So that's where I say there could be a discrepancy when you look at that frequency count. So when you actually have the section by section breakdown in that larger chart, that doesn't include the music. So it really zeroes in on those sections where there's flexibility in staffing for the principals. And that shows what I think is the amazing job that they're both able to work that out. And we're staffing basically the same exact averages across town in that regard at our high schools. And then finally, the last one here is Tate High with their distribution and range of class sizes as well.
So I'm going to suggest, Matt, if there's any discussion or questions, that we put this on a future work session.
Sure.
Is there anything you need from us tonight?
I don't believe so, unless Amy has any other comments, but I told you we'd be brief, so unless you have more for us.
Any issue with putting on a future?
Do we have data on the free and reduced lunch numbers in our preschools? I know that's not included here, but
You could get it.
I'd be interested in seeing that. Yeah.
I have one really quick question.
Sure.
These numbers for classes are based on the October 1 data, correct?
Yeah.
Whenever the winter break comes around, I know that traditionally we have some students leave the district, some students come into this district. Are there any hot spots that have popped up in the last couple of weeks that we're aware of that are different than are reflected in these numbers?
Not on our end. Principals, the secondary principals really look at that master schedule throughout the year when they're trying to balance those sections even from try 1 to try 3. So they're kind of constantly keeping that in play. If there is a hot spot that comes up, kind of the general process is they would call Amy or I, depending elementary or secondary, and ask what they can do to address it. But most of the times they're problem solving that themselves and trying to balance some sections and be creative with student schedules to fit that need. If it gets to a point where they don't think they can do that, then they reach out to us.
Sometimes, there's reports that are somewhat exaggerated that we receive, and some of the data here maybe discredits some of those reports and provides a more stable set of information. So I was just curious if there were known hotspots, and I know you guys are always really good, really sensitive to addressing those as they pop up.
I would just say as a reminder that FTE and the class size that you see in there is as of October.
Mm-hmm.
So we ran reports again in November and as late as just in the last 2 days at the elementary level. So we're continuing to look at that. We have a regular poll on that.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Matt, Amy, Adam. Next item on the agenda is the certified budget. And Craig, there's no action required tonight. You're just going to go through the assumptions, right?
Yes, thank you. I know that you all share
we're just happy for you.
This time of year.
We're happy near you.
And to that end, it is our custom that I provide you with the assumptions that I think are pertinent to build into the budget process. And this is your opportunity to reflect on those, and if you think there's something else that we should be using to build our certified budget, we can certainly engage in that conversation. But I wanted to outline what our timelines are. First of all, the important dates after this evening. We'll talk about this again on the 28th. It's our hope that the school aid formula will come out within the week, and I'll be able to start working on that and get some pretty good ideas for at least some scenarios by the 28th, and have worked up some of our supporting documentation for you to take a look at. Our governor did, in his recommendation, provide some guidance as far as our supplemental state aid. And so this year, it won't be quite as much of a guess as it was last year, because I think it's coalescing around that 2% range, and that we'll talk about in a few minutes. We'll come back on March 28th with the superintendent's formal recommendation to you, and that will establish our tax rate. We'll publish, as we always are required to do, for public comment then on April 11th, and submit our budget per the state guidelines by the 15th of April. There are 10 areas, and I'll just do these really, really quickly. As you know, we enjoy a very strong tax base here. That trend continued this year at 4.23%. We're now over $6 billion when you add everything up, including the tax increment financing of a little over $500 million. And all of those combined add up to that total, and so that continues our trend of a strong tax base, and it will help us keep our tax rate to our community very stable for this year. As far as the regular program growth, I did go through some scenarios for you. If we were to receive 0, 1, 2, 3, 2.5 from the state, and what that translates into district growth, because of our enrollment growth. Of course, the school aid formula allows us to receive a little bit more in the way of growth in our budget because of that student growth. And so our numbers that are reflected in our budget are a little bit different than what the state is. And so under this scenario, you can see that at 2%, we're looking at 4.31% as far as regular program growth in our budget. I am proposing in our long-term forecast model to use 2% for the supplemental state assistance, and that's always just a pure guess, as you well know. In item 4, under enrollment, we did have our demographers report just a few meetings back, so these are fresh estimates from our demographer, and I plugged those in, and we'll carry those on through our projection process as well. Cash reserve, this is looking very, very good for us this year. Our finances are probably in some of the best shape they've been in a while, as far as our unspent balance and our solvency ratio are all very strong right this minute, and they need to be, because why? We're moving into a period of time here where we're going to have some really strong pressures on the general fund with opening up Liberty High School. It's a large building. There are a lot of costs associated with that will put pressure on our general fund. And also, we've positioned our finances in this manner, and I feel very fortunate that you've been such a good partner in that and in helping to do that, because as we go out for our bond referendum, this really positions our financial situation in the best light possible for our rating agencies and things like that to take a look at. We've enjoyed a very good bond rating, as you well know, which enables us to borrow money at the lowest possible cost. And should the community come out to support that bond referendum, and that's an affirmative vote for us, we'll be able to go out to our rating agencies with this strong financial position and get the very best rating that we can achieve. Then as we move on through here, IPERS, it remains stable. That's a fairly large cost item for us, as you can guess, at 14.9%. By the time you get the employee and the employer's portion all wrapped up there, there's a lot of resources going out to IPERS. Medical insurance, we enjoyed a period of time where we had some very stable rates. Then we needed to bounce those up a year ago, and then the current year that we're in now, we're a little over 8%, where we had a premium adjustment. And I can tell you that as we're looking at the renewal this year, the numbers aren't coming back very well, and we could be looking at a fairly high percentage increase for fiscal year 18 as well. In the general fund revenues and expenditures, I'm going to try and do the best that I can with the holding those costs down in those areas that aren't a part of the employee costs. And of course, employee costs are always dependent on negotiations. And because 84% of our budget is made up of staff, it's our single largest cost driver. And so negotiations really do drive our overall expenditure budget. And the other areas just we try to maintain those the best we can. Finally, on the back, the very last page, you'll see the other supporting funds that go along with our general fund and what I project as far as revenue and expenditures in those funds. So in a nutshell, that's how I'll be constructing your budget this year, and if you have any feedback for me at this time, I'll certainly accept that, and otherwise there'll be more opportunity for you to reflect on this as we go through the process.
Questions, comments?
What's the ideal target on percent of general fund that goes to teacher salaries and benefits?
100%. I just had to say that for Greg.
And
well,
the realistic one?
Book answer is 80%.
That was 80 to 82%. Is that right?
The target is the target range is between 75 and 85%.
Okay.
And there are some things built in there. For instance, we contract out transportation. So transportation is not an employee cost to us, it's a contract services for us. Mm-hmm. And so for us, having 84% in our staff costs is really on the high side. It should be more like 80% because we don't have those as a part of our salary mix like other school districts do in that target range. So it's a concern area. I shared that with you, and when I shared that with our financial condition a couple of months ago, mm-hmm. Having that at that 84% is a significant concern as we move along. So.
But last year I predicted 5 years from now you'll rewrite the book, and I think 4 years from now you'll rewrite the book on that methodology. So, any other questions? Craig, enough for tonight, but I'd like to understand going forward the outlook on the assessed valuation and impact on future tax rate. So it's not really this year budget, but okay. All right, anything else on this one? As always, thank you, Craig, for guiding us through the process.
Yep.
With that, the next item on the agenda is the resolution to approve the SBRC application. Craig?
We have one of our routine.
Can I suggest we jump right to action? Yeah.
Yeah, this needs action.
Yeah.
This is very routine for us. We abate asbestos-containing materials through the course of the year. We pay for those out of our general fund. Iowa Code allows us to go back and recover those dollars so that we're not having to spend other monies that we can spend on our educational process and so forth. This year's amount we're asking for is the $346,478. Last year we asked for $343,081, and the year before that $244,083, just to give you a perspective.
So. And with that, I'd entertain the motion in the packet.
I move that we.
You go ahead.
I move that we approve the resolution provided for SBRC application for modified allowable growth for abatement of environmental hazards in the amount of $346,478.
Second.
Any discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thanks, Kim. Next item on the agenda is the drinking water results. Steve?
So earlier this school year, actually last summer, we began to talk about issues that were of interest to us that needed regular attention. One of those was our drinking water and testing on that. And so at that point in time, we discussed putting in place a regular and routine process for testing the drinking water. Craig then worked with Dwayne and Dave to get that up and running. We are working with an outside partner on that, and we have our first round of testing to results to report. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dwayne and Dave.
Thank you, Steve. The initial test, and you can see the results on page 1 and 2 of the report. The action level that's given to us by the EPA is 20 parts per billion. And we had one school over that, and that was Trek at 40, and everybody's heard about it. We had one school just under that at Southeast Junior High at 14 that we're continuing to monitor, and we'll probably take additional actions. But there are also several other schools that just had trace amounts at Corville Central, Lemmy, and West. I think they're just ones that we should pay attention to. And we've done some follow-up testing since then at Trek. There's been a few more tests and some investigation. And we've also asked the city to assist us with the testing of the water when it enters the building. We're confident that the city has done a great job of monitoring their results. We just want to make sure that it's not a problem at the connection. So we're just in a process of elimination. And I think at this time I'll turn it over to Dave McKenzie. Why don't you just give him a little update on what we've done there so far?
Okay. We have done some more testing in the building at different points to check out both different drinking fountains and different sinks in classrooms around the building. What we found is that in the newer addition, the newer parts of the building, we're testing fine. But in the original part of the building, which I call the East Wing, both in the classrooms, the kitchen, the gym, which was the original drinking fountain that pointed us to a problem, and there were also 2 drinking fountains in the hallway in that wing. All of those are testing high enough to be of concern, not above the 20 parts per billion, but certainly high enough to where we need to take some kind of action rather than just continue to use them. So what's happened since we did some testing about, I guess the second round of testing we did was about 2 weeks ago. We asked the staff to stop using all the drinking fountains and water sources in the East Wing for a source of drinking water, or that includes making coffee or whatever else, and use other sources of drinking water in the building until we could isolate the problem a little further and come up with some options. At this point, as Dwayne mentioned, we've had somebody from the Iowa City Water Department come in and help us with our troubleshooting. Of course, they're familiar with doing troubleshooting in homes, and the gentleman that was working with us, Craig Meacham, was really helpful, and he's still working with us to try to nail this down. But it seems to be pretty widespread in the East Wing. It doesn't look like something that we can just point toward a couple of small areas and say that's it. It apparently is the fault of the original galvanized pipe together with a patchwork of other things that we've added since then, and also the fact that we just don't run very much water in the Trek building. There aren't that many students and staff there, so because we don't frequently get things flushed out, we not only have the problem with lead buildup, but we've also got a lot of rust in the pipes as well. So it looks like the best short-term solution is going to be to add some filters at the drinking fountains. They should be very effective. We do have some more tests that we're waiting on that should come back in the next few days, and once those are in, we'll make a decision on what we're going to do. Obviously, we could do very extensive replumbing and other things, but at this point, the quick and dirty fix is going to be water filters, and that'll get us going, and we'll figure out our long-term solution from there.
So Dwayne, Dave, is there any help you need from us?
I think just your patience while we work through the troubleshooting and get more tests. And our first priority is to make it safe. So we think the filters are the best way to do that quickly. There are a lot of sources of lead, potential lead. One is solder. Back then, when that building was built in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even when I was in construction in the 70s, they still used lead and solder. There's a lot of lead and solder inside of fixtures. So that's a potential source. So we just have to start isolating all the sources. And it'll just take a little more time. But I think the folks at Trek have been very cooperative.
They have been.
Yeah, and I'm encouraged to hear that you're utilizing the city water department, and I would encourage us going forward to get relationships with all the different municipalities in the school district for assistance in water testing going forward, because I think they're the best. You know, it's what they do. It's what they do day in and day out that way. And also from what I heard, and I spoke with some of the city people too, and they said they're very cooperative and wanted to help. That with the high temperatures in the cold water, that we should also be testing for bacteria and make sure that that chlorine loses its effectiveness with that. And like you say, it's just the repurposing of the building. It was an unforeseen situation that it just doesn't have the flow going through it, and flushing is a major component. And on that lead solder too, we have to, and I don't doubt, Dwayne, that you're getting the best product and everything, but just for everyone's knowledge, that stuff, the cheap stuff from overseas can have lead in it, lead solder still, even though we don't. So we have to make sure that everything we use is a good quality product. I'm sure that's what you're using, and yeah, galvanized pipe, and I'm sure over at Roosevelt you have galvanized plastic, PVC, who knows what all's in there.
Yeah. We use a lot of plumbing products from American Standard, Elway, Mullen. There's a number of good companies that we use, Kohler.
Right.
But we can't control their manufacturing process either, so.
Well, understood, but the most you can do is just buy quality products from American manufacturers.
Well, and the good news is we self-initiated this whole test, and this is why you want to do it. So it just tells us we probably need to do it on a regular basis, right? Based on the data.
Yeah, I think that's worthy, and it's also worth noting that if you compare it to places like Flint, Michigan, that their results were in the thousands.
Like 15,000 or something like that.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah.
So it's really minute, but it's still serious. We still need to fix the problem. So.
Do we know how long it was like that?
No idea. I don't think we've ever tested for lead in the district that I know of. We couldn't find any previous
Did we let parents know just so they can? I mean,
when I spoke with the city officials in December, I believe that there was something done, and I think that information could be ascertained by just asking them, because I think they talked of one time when they went around and checked.
Well, to my knowledge, they check the city supply every year.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
And that's a given. But how much they've done inside the buildings is questionable. Well, we can dig further.
But we let parents.
We did, and as with any issue that we have that's in the similar vein, we post notices also. So posted on-site notification.
Have you guys done anything to specifically provide the students water bottles or anything that they can, so that they don't have to travel as far?
We actually just had that discussion today. Because the building has safe water in the west wing and unsafe water in the east wing, at least in some of those features, we've been routing kids through the west wing for drinking water and staff for other uses. But today we actually had the conversation about, given our concerns about all of the fixtures on the east wing, the possibility of then providing bottled water for students in the interim, because that disrupts their day as they're moving back and forth between those two wings.
Are they still using the restrooms in that area too?
For non-drinking water, we are still using the water in there. For drinking water, then we're going to the West Wing.
Could I comment on that, Steve? Yeah. Just to mention that we've learned that I've done a little research here in the last few weeks that I didn't start out with much knowledge on lead in drinking water, but lead can't be absorbed through the skin, so it's not a concern with hand washing or use in the restrooms. It's just an issue of drinking.
And also, young adults are less susceptible than young children.
But if they have water bottles, they're going to fill them in the bathroom, right?
Right, and I'm just saying, you know, if you're a kid, sometimes you know, I'm just trying to make sure that our children there, that are
Right.
there, are informed about that and enough, because it's you know, it could be unconscious. I'm just trying to make sure that we're taking every precaution.
And from that standpoint, we talked about ease of access. If it's easier to access water there than walk to the West Wing, we don't want students, whether known or unknown, to do that. And so that was part of that conversation about providing bottled water in the school so that it's as easy as possible to access a safe drinking water source.
Can I ask, the recommendations on page 3 that are from December, have they all been taken? Just the third page of the attachment.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they have.
So that one at Southeast, for example, has that been isolated or replaced?
That one has been shut down for the moment so that we can do a little further investigation. Yeah, as soon as we got the results, we just shut that one down.
All right, any other questions? All right, thanks, guys. Next item on the agenda is Appendix 9, Dwayne.
Thank you.
The
We have
executive summary
four-
would be great.
Excuse me?
The executive summary would be great.
Yeah, I'll give it to you. Four projects with 5 requests. The first one is a building envelope program, and it's a substantial completion of the Corville Central Window Project. And it's just a release of $23,303 in retainage and accepting the project, both of which we recommend. The City High door replacement, we made the district made a request and the change in the door hardware. So that was at our request. I don't have the amount right in front of me. And then at Liberty High School, we also made a request were made for $34,591 to change some mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. One of the major items was a code request to add a relief valve on the chiller. And at Lucas, a request for $11,231, which included some flooring changes that were a deduct, actually. And then we had to make some plumbing and electrical changes, and the biggest one was upsizing the electrical panel to make it all work, and then changing some colors on the door jamb. And with that, I'd answer any questions you might have.
Entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the Appendix 9 items as presented.
Second. Further discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thanks, Kim. Next item on the agenda is items withdrawn from consent. Phil, number 10.
Yes, let's go up here and make sure I get the numbers right. 10, the PSYOPs, which sounds like a bad Schwarzenegger movie. It's a 2-day workshop costing us $27,000. Isn't this something the University of Iowa or Grant Wood AEA with the $6.4 million we're giving them, they couldn't conduct?
This is part of our ELL programming, so I'll let either Amy or Laura.
I can talk to it a little bit. So for the last several years, we've been using this company, Cal, to come in and train our staff. We've used Title III dollars, so categorical dollars, to do it. It's actually a 3-day training where 60 participants will come to that, 2 groups of 30. So it's just something that we've typically done. Grant Wood AEA does provide some training during the year and is available in limited capacity in the summers to do it. So it's just been a practice that we've had for years. Last year, due to federal law or sheltered classes that are taught at the secondary level, those teachers are required to have the sheltered instruction. So it's something that we feel is important to continue to have delivered by this particular agency. Now, we have been having discussions about train-the-trainer model and if we can train our own people to deliver it, because also in part of our ELL plan moving forward, it's one of 4 areas that we would want to have all staff trained in as we continue to grow our ELL programs.
All right, entertain a motion on 10.
And I make a motion that we vote on
To approve. What's that, item number 10?
Sheltered instruction observation, SIOP model.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Liebig, Deloach, Rotland, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea, and Hemingway voting nay.
Thanks, Kim. Next is 12, Sylvan Learning.
Right, and on this one, I guess I was curious, how many tutors are there? How many kids will be involved? And again, is this something, I hate to admit defeat and surrender to Sylvan Learning as taking over for us, but can you explain a little bit more on this for us, please?
So as the No Child Left Behind, we're in that middle of that transition to Every Student Succeeds Act, and as part of that transition plan, the Iowa Department of Ed has come back and put several things in place in the meantime. So the freezing of the sign and dine-in designations, transfers, that kind of thing, and the SES tutoring component of that was yet another piece. SES tutoring, in the past, we have had to turn over to other agencies just like Sylvan. So we were very excited to learn last year that we could keep those dollars in-house and have our own staff then provide tutoring. What we've found is that in 5 of our 8 buildings, we're struggling to get our teachers to stay after school to do this additional work. Some of those Title I buildings already have after-school programs where they are employing our teachers. And so in these 5 buildings, it's just the areas where we've struggled. So our fallback then is to go to Sylvan. Yes, I agree. I mean, it's ideal for us to be able to keep this in-house. I think it goes on to the same thing that we're seeing with summer school. Districts have a hard time filling positions. So this is the most likely the only year of it, because as we see in the new draft, Iowa's plans, we don't see the SES tutoring mentioned at all. So it's just this transition period where we're trying to provide services. I don't have any hard numbers for you though, Phil.
Do you have like an idea? I mean,
don't.
No idea, okay. But there's nothing that prevents us from paying our own
Nope.
teachers to do this work?
No, we've gone out several times to these buildings, and I even proposed, do we want to reach out to other buildings? When we go try to get our teachers from other buildings to travel, though, then we have an issue of what to do with our students in the meantime, so.
Is this an opportunity to reach out to the University of Iowa and see if there's opportunities there?
So this is where I'm getting into an area. I suspect that the DE then, if we can't find our own personnel, has us fall back to a list of those former providers. I can't tell you that that's the case for certain, but that's my best guess.
Because I know that the engineering college provides MESA tutoring for students in the district and math and that. So I move that we approve the Sylvan Learning contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Liebig, Deloach, Rotland, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea and Hemingway voting nay.
Right, next item on the agenda is agenda setting. And first on there is the January 31st meeting, which we agreed last meeting. It's just called a special meeting because it's not on our regular schedule. And basically we have community comment, and then the board work is the facilities master plan, geo bond. I think that one's relatively straightforward. 14th, we have 3 meetings, closed session, which we had previously discussed for superintendent evaluation, the board meeting. You can see the agenda. And then on the work session, we basically have facilities master plan. I think we should make sure we put facilities master plan / geo bond, or get them both under there. I mean, it's the geo bond's the funding strategy for facilities master plan. But then we had the other items we talked that we want to get on work session. Board retreat wise, I think doodle poll wise, the best dates were February 19th and 26th, but not everybody could attend. Do we want to look at other dates or go with what we got, or? Thoughts there? All right, we can talk that next agenda setting, probably on the 14th. All right, with that, any other agenda item? Agenda setting items? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. The work session will start immediately in the back.
Said she thinks it's 2 to 3 days per week. But she